The grocery bill remains one of the clearest ways Americans experience inflation. Not through a chart, not through an economic report, but through a cart, a receipt, and the total at the register. In May 2026, the official data showed grocery inflation cooling. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that food at home rose 0.1% in May. Over 12 months, food at home was up 2.7%. On paper, that was a slower pace. Inside the store, the picture was more uneven. Families do not buy the average grocery index. They buy fruit, they buy vegetables, they buy beef, they buy coffee, juice, milk, bread, cereal, and restaurant meals when cooking is not possible. And within the official numbers, several of those categories were still rising faster than the headline grocery figure. For the 12 months ending in May 2026, fruits and vegetables rose 6.1%. Non-alcoholic beverages rose 5.8%. Food away from home rose 3.5%. That is the gap between inflation on paper and inflation in the cart. The average number can improve while the items a household regularly buys remain expensive. This does not mean the official data is wrong. It means grocery inflation is uneven. Some categories are cooling, some are falling, others remain under pressure. A household feels the mix, not the average. The Bureau of Labor Statistics released the May 2026 Consumer Price Index on June 10, 2026. The data covered the U.S. city average and showed that grocery inflation had slowed from the previous month. The same report also showed that several everyday categories were still elevated compared with a year earlier. That distinction is important. A 0.1% monthly increase suggests the pace of grocery inflation slowed in May. A 2.7% annual increase means food-at-home prices were still higher than a year earlier. Category-level increases explain why many shoppers may not feel much relief. A household buying more fresh produce, beverages, beef, or restaurant meals may experience the grocery economy very differently from a household buying more items that are flat or declining. The USDA Economic Research Service showed a similar pattern in its May 2026 food price outlook. Using April data, USDA reported that beef and veal prices were 14.8% higher than in April 2025. Fresh vegetable prices were 11.5% higher. Non-alcoholic beverage prices were 5.1% higher. Those figures are not the same as the May CPI headline. They show the pressure inside specific categories before the May report. They help explain why a shopper can hear that inflation is cooling, then walk into the store and still see high prices in the sections they use most. Food prices move through several layers before they reach the checkout lane. There are farm-level prices, wholesale prices, transportation and fuel costs, retailer costs, promotional strategies, and margins. The USDA notes that price volatility is generally higher at farm and wholesale levels than at retail levels. That means changes can move unevenly through the system before consumers see the final shelf price. Retail prices do not always move at the same time as upstream costs. They can lag. They can vary by category. They can be affected by supply conditions, transportation costs, and competition among stores. That is why grocery inflation can look calmer at the headline level while certain aisles remain under pressure. Beef is one example. USDA linked beef and veal price pressure to a smaller U.S. cattle herd since 2019 and tight supplies. That is a supply-side issue. It does not disappear simply because the monthly grocery index slows. If cattle supplies are tight and beef prices remain elevated, shoppers buying beef can still face pressure even when the broader grocery number cools. Fresh vegetables show another category-level strain. USDA reported fresh vegetable prices were 11.5% higher in April 2026 than a year earlier. For households buying produce every week, that increase matters. It can affect routine choices. It may change what goes into the cart. It may change what gets replaced, delayed, or skipped. Beverages show a similar pattern. USDA said non-alcoholic beverage prices were higher, partly because of higher global coffee prices. BLS later reported that non-alcoholic beverages rose 5.8% over the 12 months ending in May 2026. This category matters because beverages are regular purchases. Coffee, juice, tea, and similar products can become small but repeated pressures inside a household budget. That is why the phrase, "inflation is cooling," can sound incomplete to consumers. It may be accurate at the index level, but it does not fully describe the shopping experience. A family does not feel inflation as one number. It feels it through repetition, a few dollars more on produce, a higher price at the meat counter, a beverage aisle that no longer feels as affordable, a restaurant meal that costs more when cooking is not an option. Those smaller pressures can accumulate. When they arrive alongside rent, utilities, insurance, and debt payments, they become part of a broader household budget problem. Company data also shows that shoppers are changing behavior. Kroger, based in Cincinnati, reported quarterly sales of $46.12 billion on June 18, 2026. Reuters reported that Kroger maintained its fiscal 2026 forecast, but warned of rising inflationary pressure in the second half of the year. Kroger CEO Greg Foran said customers were being more deliberate with their spending and sometimes shopping Kroger selectively. He said the company was seeing too many promotional trips and not enough full basket trips. That comment describes how consumers respond when the grocery bill becomes harder to manage. They do not always stop shopping. They change how they shop. They look for promotions. They split trips. They buy fewer full baskets. They become more selective. That is a household-level response to category-level pressure. Reuters also reported that Kroger was competing with lower-price rivals, including Walmart and Costco. Analyst Arun Sundaram of CFRA Research described an escalating value war as companies leaned harder into price to defend market share and drive traffic. For consumers, that competition can matter. Promotions and price cuts can help on some items. But a promotional shopping pattern also suggests that customers are actively managing the bill, not shopping as usual. Kroger's gross margin fell to 22.7% of sales, down from 23% a year earlier. Reuters reported that higher fuel sales, transportation costs, and spending weighed on margins. That does not prove every grocery chain is facing the same pressure. It does show how costs and competition affected one major retailer. It also connects the store shelf to the larger system around it. Transportation costs matter because food has to move. Retailer spending matters because stores have operating costs. Margins matter because companies are trying to compete while protecting profitability. Consumers see the final price. That price reflects a chain of pressures before the product reaches the cart. The government view, the company view, and the consumer experience each show a different part of the same story. Government data says grocery inflation cooled in May. USDA data shows category-level pressure remains uneven. Kroger says shoppers are becoming more deliberate and promotion-focused. Analysts say grocery retailers are competing harder on value. These facts do not necessarily conflict. Together, they help explain why the grocery experience can remain difficult even when the headline number improves. For middle-class households, grocery spending is not optional. Some purchases can be delayed. A vacation can be postponed. Entertainment can be reduced. Food has to be bought again and again. That repetition turns a price increase into a budget issue. A household may not track CPI categories, but it knows when a normal trip costs more. It knows when the same basket feels smaller. It knows when a dinner choice changes because one category is too expensive. It knows when promotions become a strategy, not a bonus. The impact is also uneven across households. A shopper buying more dairy may have seen some relief because BLS reported dairy and related products fell 1.0% over the year ending May 2026. A household buying more fruits, vegetables, beverages, beef, or restaurant meals faced stronger price pressure. That unevenness is central to the story. There is no single grocery experience. There is only the mix of what each household buys. For some shoppers, the headline number may match the receipt. For others, the cart may still feel expensive. The current status is mixed. As of the May 2026 CPI release, grocery inflation had cooled month to month. Food at home rose only 0.1% in May, but prices were still 2.7% higher than a year earlier. Several categories remained elevated over 12 months. USDA forecast food at home prices to rise 3.2% in 2026, with a prediction interval from 1.3% to 5.2%. That forecast is not an outcome, it is a projection. The next important data point is the June 2026 CPI release, scheduled for July 14th, 2026. Until then, the verified picture remains uneven. The pace of grocery inflation cooled. The pressure did not disappear. The cart still depends on the categories inside it. That is why the grocery story remains important. It is not enough to ask whether inflation is rising or falling. The more useful question is where the pressure remains, who is exposed to it, and how it changes household behavior. For ordinary Americans, the issue is not an economic average. It is the weekly decision at the store. What goes into the cart? What stays on the shelf? What gets replaced? What gets postponed? And what the receipt says at the end.